This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. Open here, and Jushin Liger, man, he just stands out in WCW programming, I guess just because I remember him so much more from his Japanese stuff, and to know that he's one of the rare guys who got to wrestle for the WWF and WCW, and of course every major Japanese promotion over the years. Bona fide Hall of Famer, no doubt about it.
You know, he's just one of those guys that appeals to Japanese audiences and audiences around the world. You have to appreciate his talent, period.
How much of his success do you think is just the unique mask and unique look?
I think the look grabs you to begin with, but very, very soon after, I know being a trained eye, if I could call myself a trained eye, I'm looking at a guy that can perform at that level. I would look at that headdress and that suit as being hot, cumbersome, and being a little difficult to work in.
Right.
So which makes him even better.
Yeah, if he can look that good, constrained like that.
You know, I had a very limited time with a mask on when I was in Continental. And you know, the fact that I didn't have great vision was bad. It worked against having a mask on. I'm a little claustrophobic, same thing. You know, and I didn't have the suit that accompanied it. That was a full down to the wrist, down to the ankles bodysuit that he was wearing. And the guy, I don't think, ever drew a long breath.
It's really remarkable. And we see here as we're opening the show, on the left, we've got Tony Schiavone. On the right, a very young Eric Bischoff. This is when he is still very much early in his WCW career. He would even classify himself here as a C-level announcer. Little did we know, he's going to go on to be one of the biggest names in wrestling history.
Yeah, and him and Tony actually clean up pretty well at this point, don't they?
How fucking hysterical is it that even here, Tony Schiavone has to have his chair higher? I mean, look at the arm placement. It's funny because you know Eric Bischoff's much taller than Tony Schiavone. Tony Schiavone's little legs are dangling wee underneath that chair.
He does have the Napoleon thing, doesn't he?
Oh, big time. It's been something fans noticed during Nitro, that he would always be taller than Dusty Rhodes. It's like, you're not taller than Dusty Rhodes. You're not taller than Larry Zbyszko. What are you doing?
And in those days, we didn't even notice it. It's so great to go back and look at this stuff now because it just looks completely different with a fresh set of eyes.
Well, in Missy Hyatt looks completely different. We saw her last week on the Continental Celebration for AEW. I got to tell you, I appreciate that Tony Khan has a love of the old school territories, where we saw Memphis celebrated a few weeks ago, and then here last week in Huntsville, Continental. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. You know, I've always, you know, had the respect for the people that came before me and provided, you know, me with a job. And, you know, I think that Tony Khan shares those same sentiments. And, you know, it's awesome to see a guy in his position have a real love for the wrestlers and for the wrestling business.
Absolutely. And we're getting ready to start the show here. Of course, we've got a barn burner of a show lined up here, including a rather unique pairing, yourself and Bobby Eaton. I watched this ahead of me and you watching it today. I know that your favorites are probably, you know, Tully or Ole, but my goodness, how great would a tag team have been long term, you and Bobby Eaton?
I loved being partners with Bobby Eaton. I learned so much, you know, like I'd already appreciated his value. I already knew he was in one of those top 5 classifications from a performance standpoint. But when you get to be in there and be a part of it and bleed off of what he starts, or have him come after what you've already got rolling, to see that our ability to blend together was really, really cool.
And what a special announcement this is. Jesse the Body Ventura coming to the ring on a motorcycle, clearly one of the biggest personalities in wrestling. He's fresh off of an incredible run, unlike no other, arguably in the history of wrestling with the WWF. He became a bona fide celebrity there, even appeared in a handful of movies, of course, most famously Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And this is before he's going to go into politics, but after he got the big gavel swinging his way at his judgment, where he received, I believe, to the tune of $800,000 or some odd number like that for royalties for Vince McMahon using his voice and likeness on all of the video VHSs and things like that. So it's a monumental deal for you guys to have him on your side of the presentation. And if anything, it feels like the problem is you've got too many great announcers. You've got Tony Schiavone, you've got Jim Ross, you've got Gordon Soley. Now you've got Jesse the Body Ventura. It's a lot of talent.
Never thought about it like that, but you're absolutely right. And they were all unique, to themselves. Neither one of those guys were anything like the other one. So I just didn't think about that lineup till you just said it.
What is the advantage or the disadvantage, in your opinion, of having one of the former quote-unquote boys be the announcer? We've always heard as fans, the job of the announcer is to get the talent over, not themselves. And I think some of the criticism would be that occasionally when you get a guy who had a big personality as an in-ring performer, he's more interested in putting himself over than the product. Did you disagree with that assessment, or would you fall in line with it as someone who has seen both sides, both in-ring and quote-unquote office?
When you got a personality like the one we're looking at it right now, and you've got a guy that has gotten over to the degree as a talent and as an announcer that Jesse Ventura did, I don't know how you could, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know you could deny him an occasional putting himself over.
Right.
Because he does such a great job of making you listen to what his point of view is.
What do you think of the Super Brawl naming concept? The first Super Brawl, they introduced it sort of like baseball has the World Series, football has the Super Bowl, we have Super Brawl. I feel like that's a Dustyism. I could be wrong, but it feels like it would have been a Dusty idea because we know through the years that Dusty was very much a fan. By the way, look at the inside of the Mecca. What a cool looking arena, is it not?
Yeah, even the people, if you look at the upstairs, they're almost right on top of the ring.
What a great place to watch wrestling. It feels like there's no bad seats there.
No, it's like the old building in Columbia, South Carolina. One of the greatest arenas on earth. It didn't hold that many, but every seat felt like they were 10 feet away from the ring. It was really cool. That's what that looks like to me right there.
So this being a February pay-per-view, of course, historically, the Super Bowl happening late January, early February, this is certainly a wink and a nod to the Super Bowl. And as a result, Super Brawl became sort of a heritage pay-per-view for you guys that you kept around for a long time. And there he is, the man of the hour, Jushin Thunder Liger, going to be taking on Flying Brian Pilman. We spent a lot of time talking about, or a few minutes talking about Jushin Liger a moment ago, but not nearly enough about Brian Pilman. I feel like Pilman was ahead of his time in that he knew very early on, and maybe it was out of necessity, how to adapt. And so his character really evolved where here we're seeing the young, mulleted, Bengal tights, high-flying Brian. Later, of course, thanks to some debilitating ankle injuries, we would have to get a few more layers, and it became more about character work, less about in-ring. He kind of reminds me a little bit in that regard of a Chris Jericho, where he's evolved as time went on. This loose cannon persona and Flying Brian could not be any further apart, similar to the white meat babyface Chris Jericho that came in the WCW and now the leader of the Inner Circle.
100%. You got to remember the origins as Brian Pilman as a athlete. He was on the suicide team. That's what he did for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was on the kickoff team. His job was to run down there and kill somebody or get killed in the process. That takes a lot of guts, and he embraced it. And at probably 2 1/4, I don't know what he weighed at the time, but he wasn't the biggest guy in the world. But anybody would tell you that Brian Pilman, and I talked to a couple of the other football players that he brought down to the arena, when we were in town, they said, man, that cat was all over the place. And they meant that as a compliment.
Yeah, he had a crazy motor. That was certainly his reputation. I think he even played in college nose guard, which is just unbelievable. Usually that's a guy who's 300 pounds or so. And here you've got a guy who's nearly 100 pounds shy of that, but I guess his tenaciousness and his speed he was just unworldly. And, of course, for whatever reason, football didn't work out. He found wrestling, and here we are.
Yep, and he just picked up that reckless abandon that he played football with. He just brought it, to professional wrestling. But as far as being talented, I mean, you can look at the athleticism from the guy.
And by the way, how ahead of its time is this match from 1992 we're watching here? I mean, this thing, 28 years old, and this could be on TV on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, any day of the week right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, everything they're doing is, you might as well say, current.
Speaking of current, Brian Pilman Jr. has made some waves in more recent years, sort of carving out his own niche within professional wrestling. Have you had a chance to see Brian Jr. yet?
Not yet, but I met him at an AEW event in Chicago. Backstage, he came up and introduced himself. I told him how much I respected and liked his dad. And, I'm a big fan of second-generation wrestlers. I think they have something special. They almost get an edge just by osmosis. It just kind of seeps in their pores a little bit. I don't know why that is, but they have a little bit of advantage. But the downside is they got to be twice as good as everybody else either. Also, because people think they're getting somewhat of a free ride. I don't think this kid is getting a free ride anywhere. He's earning his way along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if he was getting a free ride, he would have already been, signed and thrown into an angle. And thankfully, he's going about it a different way, and I think he'll be better for it. Man, what high-flying action we've got here with these two guys. You've wrestled a lot of Japanese performers over the years. How difficult is it? I realize this may be a silly question, but how difficult is it to sort of structure a match like this when there is a real language barrier?
I guess it would be very difficult. Now, my experience going over in wrestling, I'm just a wrestler. I'm a mat wrestler, not so many high spots, So when I would go over there and, I would just wrestle and they would just wrestle me back and we'd brawl a little bit and we'd do some more wrestling. I didn't have to worry about, all the high flying stuff. So I can't attest to the language barrier, but I know for a fact Brian didn't speak any Japanese. So, I would assume that he just kind of, got an interpreter and put a couple things together, and he said, we'll just fill in the rest of it as we go. And that's what they did. And I know Liger was seasoned enough that he was fine with that.
I mean, when you really think about it, the amount of physicality that's involved, I don't think there's anything else like it where they don't speak and yet they're working together.
Here's something that most people don't believe and they don't understand, but it's 100% truth. When you're coming up and learning the business and you watch all of the different people that you may be wrestling, and then this is the way I handled it and a lot of the pros handled it, especially career heels, and coming from a time when the heel was in charge of the match and in charge of everything that went on inside those ropes. You would study a guy's moves and all of his stuff and all of his counters. So when you went to the ring, you had pretty much his offense down, you had his defense down, you had all the counters that he brought to the table, and you would just go in and grab something and he had a counter for it. You would set the pace, and it was your job to know what everybody in the industry did or what they couldn't do. Sometimes it was more important to stay away from what a guy couldn't do. If he couldn't drop kick, guess what? You didn't have him drop kick. And this kind of stuff, it's really pretty and it's really smooth, and you almost get lulled to sleep because it is so smooth.
Well, you got to go out of your way to watch this. This is a match that people are still talking about. I know this past year people were still trying to put together Brian Pilman Jr. and Jushin Liger for a match. And it was really just such a special moment in wrestling history, because it does feel like this match went on to inspire a whole generation of wrestlers. This is years before on the big stage we saw, Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko And a lot of that style would not only become commonplace on Nitro, but in the heavyweight title picture for WWE. But we're still a ways away from that. This is still very much the land of the giants, and these guys are showing everybody a different way. When you see this old school set like this, the old presentation with the blue and the black and the yellow, what's the first thing that comes to mind? It's
Memories.
Distinctly WCW as the color scheme, is it not?
Yep. Yes, it is. And the size of the ring. Just pretty much everything. From the dress of the referees. What they're wearing. It just everything that reminds you of the old days. Let me say this: the good old days.
Talk to me a little bit about, how you guys did travel in this era. We know you told us a little bit about how sort of unforgiving the WWF road schedule was when you were there as a performer, and then as an agent, how taxing it could be with the long drives overnight. What was it like in this era of WCW? Because it does feel like you're running shows, but maybe not as many as you used to.
I would say that the WCW schedule, now look at this. That's Japanese style, slapping each other in the face.
Figure 4, slapping each other in the face.
And that's going to piss both of them off.
Absolutely.
And that's a good thing. You know why? Because you're still working, but the intensity of the match goes up, and you feel like all of a sudden, hey, I'm in a damn fight here.
Right.
A guy slapping you in the face was great for a match. It stung like hell, and it pissed you off, and that made your work rate go through the roof. You're still working. You're not trying to cripple anybody out there, but still, intensity went way, way up. Now, I would say travel-wise in these days when this is going down, still on a very limited schedule, maybe a few select big cities, but mostly it was probably 2 days of television a week, and that was about it.
Man, these guys are still tearing it up. Behind the scenes, we should mention there was one major difference about this pay-per-view compared to other WCW pay-per-views at the time. This one is the first one priced at $24.95. Previously, they've been $19.95. Oh, it catches him with a drop kick off the top rope.
Perfect
and look at the crowd, man.
Perfect timing.
Everybody's on their feet now.
You got to appreciate this. They've been going pretty much while we've been yakking. They've been going at it, and it's been 50-50, back and forth. Yeah, nobody's really got a distinct advantage yet.
They get plenty of time here. 16 minutes and 58 seconds. It's for the WCW light heavyweight title. Meltzer loved it, gave it 4 3/4 stars. I'm never critical of Meltzer's ratings, but if this ain't 5 stars, I don't know what is. This is a great match here.
Maybe there's just no such thing as 5 stars. See, just stuff like that, to me, as ugly as that was,
it adds an air of realism.
It's real.
Absolutely.
They just went for whatever the hell it was, and they just basically banged butts.
Yes.
Violently.
Yes.
And it looked
trying
like
for the
shit.
same move.
It looked like shit and hurt like hell.
But we've seen that in mixed martial arts where 2 guys go for a kick at the same time and 2 guys go for a punch at the same time. And if it's choreographed, everything looks slick and perfect. But when it's not, oh man, nice power slam there.
Yeah, they're having a hell of a match.
They are indeed. By the way, we should mention this show is 1 month prior to WrestleMania, and we've marked the show up $5. Maybe some of that is because, we're trying to actually turn a profit for the first time in WCW. Maybe we're trying to offset some of the costs of the new talent we've brought in, including Jesse Ventura. But with this being, Sting and Lex Luger, 2 of the perennial crowd favorites in your main event, and what a card underneath, you teaming with Bobby and the Steiners and this match. A lot of people thought it was going to be the match or the show of the year. This is a match of the year candidate that we're watching here, but overall, Meltzer was a little disappointed with the show, but fans, as we heard, more than 90% gave it a thumbs up. This is really a remarkable pay-per-view, especially for its time. And here you see coming off the top rope with the big crossbody. That was a finish anywhere in the world in that day, was it not?
Yep. Yeah. You probably had a half a dozen finishes that could have been, but the beauty of it is they're not throwing them away. Both guys are selling each other. They're taking their time. They're pacing this thing. They're not just doing big moves and then just throwing them away and coming back 100%, from it. They're both damaged right now. That's what keeps your eye on the match. These guys are got to be running out of gas, and that's what makes it exciting.
I heard Sami Zayn. What in the world?
I don't know what that was.
I've never seen that ever.
That was a perennial monkey humping a football. That's what that was.
I like it. I heard Sami Zayn once describe pinfall attempts as your punctuation in a match. So if you've got, a big move, well, sometimes you need a comma. Sometimes you need a period. Sometimes you need a question mark. Sometimes you need an exclamation point. But the pinfall attempts are the punctuation in the story of the match you're trying to tell. I love that analogy.
If you're not trying to win, what are you doing?
Right.
And the only place that guys make a mistake, and I don't disagree with that psychology whatsoever, the only place they make a mistake are covering on things that do not resemble a finish.
Right.
Because it's a waste of time. It drags down the momentum.
And it makes the other pinfalls look meaningless.
Yes.
Yeah, it diminishes the value if you're doing it every time.
Covers can get monotonous if there are too many of them.
Sure, because that's not going to finish. That's not going to work. If this didn't, then that didn't. You start doing some wrestling math. The other thing I heard recently, I guess not that recently, but I heard JR say something that Bruce has said for a long time about matches, and specifically in regard to selling. He says if you're a stand-up comedian, you're going to tell a joke and you're going to give the crowd a chance to laugh before you start telling your next joke. You wouldn't just tell joke. You've got to pause, let the crowd appreciate what you just did, let them get their laugh out of their system, and then they're ready for another one. And I thought that analogy of sort of taking your time when you're trying to sell made a lot of sense. What a pinning combination that is. Arn, you win many matches like that?
Brother, if he'd have folded me up like that, I'd have thrown up.
Look, standing ovation here. And, of course, our American has won. I guess in these days that was a big deal. Everybody chanting USA. Brian Pilman, your light heavyweight champion. It feels like right here this could have been, they knew they ripped it up. The dawning of a new era in WCW. And we know you guys don't exactly go and make the light heavyweight belt a priority coming out of this. In hindsight, was that a missed opportunity? And why don't you think it happened? Too many cooks in the kitchen of the booking committee or whatever?
Who knows? But I tell you what just happened, and I'm going to just go ahead and explain to you what I just saw. You know what you were missing in this match?
What's that?
There wasn't a heel in this match.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it's good because what you just saw was a babyface match that literally was a 50-50 match. There was no heat. There was no comeback. It was not structured anything like a normal wrestling match. It was a 50-50. You slug me, I'll slug you. You come off the top on me, I'll come off the top on you. And they kept that audience plugged in without a bad guy. And in those days, that's quite a feat.
It really is a special match. Both of these guys came out of this as stars for sure. We've got 4,000 paying fans here in the arena. It's a full house of about 5,000 fans, so there is some paper here. The atmosphere for the show, I think, is a little higher. I don't know if it's the presentation being different, just the way this looks. This feels like a really big-time pay-per-view for you guys.
Well, I mean, just having tuxes on the announcers look good. I mean, it's a classy look. And it is a big show, and you can just, the build, I would have to go back and see what was done as far as the build goes. But I would think any city would have been happy to have this show at this point in the year.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.